special network forum for emerging countries. I am Eugene Lee, Vice President of IAF and responsible for developing countries. And also, I am working at Korea Aerospace Research Institute. As a Vice President of IAF for developing countries, I and the IAF Bureau prepared like these special activities in order to enhance the participation of emerging countries since last year. First one, as you see in the picture, we prepared a special booth for the emerging countries for a free exhibition. And as you see that all the happy face gathering in that booth. So this is like, not the big size, but it's a kind of, the place for get together and exchange of our space culture among our IAF regional groups. We have 3 IAF regional groups. First one is a Caribbean and Latin America groups, and then Africa group and Asia Pacific regional groups. And the booth, IAF provided location, and Korea Aerospace Research Institute provided the such furnitures and then interior. This is our second GNF for emerging countries, and first one was held in last year in Mexico. GNF has been organized to promote the attention and collaboration of international organizations and developed countries in order to bring more practical support for the emerging countries to enhance their capability to build up space technology for their living standards and also social environment. For this forum, I and Christina are prepared, and especially Dr. Jan Berner, Director General of European Space Agency, showed very special interest, and he volunteered as a moderator for this Emerging Countries Forum. And let me have a Jan Berner with a big applause. Thank you.
So, hello everybody, and I'm very happy that we can co-chair with 3 chairs, so Christina Janopapa, and then my friend Jo-Jin Lee and myself, we will moderate this session. Next time we will have even more moderators and panelists. That's stepwise we are increasing that. So we have a challenge for you. Some of you got already a sheet of paper. So please write your name on it if you have a special question, also to whom you address the question. And then we will collect them, but the task becomes even more difficult later on, so don't forget your question. And I will now have a few minutes of introduction, and after that we will start what is called a panel discussion, and we will try to have a discussion with all of you, and I hope you are also not only saying what you wanted to say all the time already, but that you are a little bit interactive. So now I would like to get my first slide. I hope this works now. Please, can I directly switch to the next one? No, it's not working. Okay, so please, that's in the background, that presentation I would like to get with a blue one, okay? Can you please do that? So Africa, this is the subject now, and Africa is seen to be just the key word for emerging countries, but we will also hear afterwards what is emerging country, what are developing countries, so I'm quite sure that we get a better information about that. So please, don't only listen to what I'm saying, try to, if you got a sheet of paper, write the question down, and Philippe will gather them, and I will misuse them later on. So, We have regional approaches, and this is, of course, we have different areas. We have the Arctic, we have the Antarctica, we have the Atlantic, we have the Alps, and we have and Africa. So this means we have 5A, and this is a 5A approach, which is important to cover the special areas and their special interests, their special challenges. And of course, we all know there are challenges. It is climate change, it is the more and more increasing deserts, it is forest fire, it is hunger, it is thirst. So there are a lot of challenges, and the question, of course, is space something which can help in those discussions, in those situations? We have migration as another aspect, which may be a follow-up, a consequence also of all of these difficult situations. And the question again is, what can space help? How can space help? Are the space agencies ready to support beyond their normal work of return of investment, of national pride, of saying just they are the greatest? So is there something where we really can see that the support of other nations, of other areas, is just in the best sense responsibility for humankind? And you know, there are the Sustainable Development Goals in this. This is the official list until number 17. I added a number 18. This should be the migration thing, because I think we have to do something also in that direction. And from my perspective, we can really do something with, no, I have to go back one. And ESA, as European Space Agency, we try to help. And there's also in the European Space Policy already some years ago, in 2010, a report about the situation, the partnership, and what can satellite application bring for a sustainable development in all the different areas. And on the left-hand side, you see what are the ESA activities supporting sustainable development. So there are a lot of open questions, and if you are interested in what ESA is doing, here is just the webpage, and we are very happy if we can help you and help us to become even more efficient. With that, I hand already over to Christina Giannopapa, and she will now moderate, and I will play the nasty guy in between, disturbing not only her, but also disturbing you with some questions in between. You start, and before you give the word to the first one, I have already a disturbance. So please, Christina.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to have everyone here. It's the second GNF, as we heard from Dr. Lee, and it is a great pleasure to have a lot of people coming from the classical parts that we have been always expecting, and some that are for the second time here with us. So today in our panelists, we have Mr. Briceno. We have also Simonetta Di Pippo, Mr. Battiston, Dr. Kibe, and Dr. Magnenta, and also we have with us Mr. Dija Ludin and Mr. Moon Sami. So we will hear from you your presentations and the questions. And I will hand over first to Dr. Briceno.
So before you start, now the first interruption, and I would like Fuki Taniguchi, or Taniguchi Fuki-san. Where is he? Okay, you get the cube at first, because you had a question to all. Please mention your question. On the black side of the cube, you can talk to the black side of the cube. We will understand you.
Okay. Hello, I'm Fuki Taniguchi from JAXA Paris office. I think the leaders of the nations really understand the importance of the space activities, but for the public society, I mean the general people, may not understand the importance of the space activity for daily life of them. So how do you think, how we can approach to them? Thank you very much.
Okay, and we just start now. You can, and it would be nice if you consider the question in your statement. If not, I will repeat it. So you have to consider it.
Well, thank you very much for the question. First, it is considered in my presentation, the answer for your important question. But let me introduce you that for us in our region, in the Central American region, since we started like 8 years ago, we understood that the cornerstone, the foundation of the space agenda in Costa Rica and in the Central American region should rely on the civil society, the power of the people, the power of inspiring the population of our country. And this is what we are going to show. So absolutely, the only one way to get engaged emerging nations first is working in education projects, working in projects that will inspire young generations from the civil society. And this is why it's very important also that the governments, space agencies also get engaged with ONGs, with NGOs, and with many ways to approach a population in general terms. In addition, for example, if you work also with the students in poor areas or in rural areas, the impact of your projects could be a small amount of money that you will invest. The impact will be huge. The impact will be measured along the years. This is something that you can measure immediately. You are going to measure maybe in 10, 15 years. But I can assure you, because we have been working so hard the last years, and you will see what we have been doing, I can assure you that the impact will be huge for our region. And I totally agree with this approach.
Go ahead, Christina. I will disturb you anyhow.
So I will pass the floor to Simona.
Before you start?
No,
yes,
yeah,
of course.
That's fine.
Yes, Flora Kerblatt, where is she? Okay, over there, please throw the cube. So, she has a special question for you. And afterwards, I will call Joel Dennerle, also seen over there. Okay, you are close enough, but that's the next one. And then I already would like that Alexander Sash is prepared also. Okay, so please.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Flora Kerblatt from CSIRO, and I also work with CIOS on the ad hoc team on SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. So I just wondered if there is any mechanism already in place at UNOSA to coordinate efforts from space agencies to support the SDGs.
There are already a few initiatives which are starting under the umbrella of the preparation of Unispace Plus 50, which is this big event taking place in June 2018 in Vienna, with all the United Nations member states attending. We have already specific actions also in place. Because one of the main topics for us is right now to try to convince member states and the UN system that space and space activities and space-based data and infrastructures are really very good tools across the board, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And you have to consider that one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, in particular number 17, which is partnerships for the goals, is also opening up new avenues for engaging all the stakeholders, including the civil society, which was mentioned just before. Just one example, since Jan Werner is here, we are developing an interesting initiative under the umbrella for the preparation of Unispace Plus 50, which is called Space Solution Compendium. And it will be a database where we will put all the possible collectible, currently available solutions coming from space activities, space research, services and applications available to everyone. And we are starting this initiative together with the European Space Agency as the main partner right now. So it's just an example. We have several initiatives of this kind, and the coordination of all the space agencies, member states, private sector, civil society, everyone will be under the umbrella of another initiative called Global Partnership for the SDGs.
Wait, you are still not free. The other two questions, so Joel and...
For me? Okay.
Yeah, both
Very
for you.
disruptive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alexander later. So, Joel,
hello.
please.
Can you hear? Yep.
Yeah, of course we can.
Good. So this question relates to emerging space nations as compared to more established space nations. And so part of UNUSA's mandate is to promote international cooperation in the peaceful uses of outer space. And that principle of international cooperation really underpins space law. In many ways, international cooperation has been fostered effectively, but do you see an inequality in the way that international regulatory regimes and standards are developed because they can run the risk of being dominated by more powerful industrialized space nations that invest more resources and time into ensuring that their technology and their regulatory and standards agendas prevail?
Yeah, again...
Wait. We take the other question in addition, and you will answer both at the same time, yes. Alexander. Otherwise, we will have too much.
Hello, Sasha Alexander here. Just to make it different from the other questions, our organization is about 40,000 people, and we're a signatory to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we're looking towards the leverage. I'm also part of the World Design Organization, which has 400,000 in its membership. So I'm curious about the multiplier effect. I think we have a lot of research, whether it's my organization or yours, that contribute to agriculture research around the world. But it's also to contact the countries and continents that aren't as involved, because there are some brilliant minds. For example, I didn't know this was on until my 17-year-old nephew told me it was happening. So I think it's the youth that we need to contact, so in mathematics and engineering and in various countries. So I just encourage those membership organizations to think about becoming signatories to the Sustainable Development Goals, so we can all report in some more stepped and more considered way, and then share that information. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to be brief. Yes, again, to answer both questions, I invite you to visit our website. You'll find a lot of answers already, because this is all part of the preparation of Unispace Plus 50. In particular, for the first question, we can address straight away the thematic priority number 2, which is dealing with the legal regime of outer space activities. And we expect member states to discuss the current situation and look at the future and see if there is any need to do some actions in that direction. And for what STEM education is concerned, this is addressed directly in a very straight manner under the thematic priority number 7, which is capacity building in the 21st century. So for sure, what we recognized both at the committee level and the Office for Outer Space Affairs level, so Secretariat level, is that we do need to look at capacity building for developing and emerging countries in a different way with respect to what was done in the past. And Unispace Plus 50 is really looking at the accomplishments, best practices, lessons learned of the past 50 years, but at the same time, he's looking at the future with new eyes, because the space arena is completely different from what it was 50 years ago, and the social environment is completely different from what it was only a few years ago.
Okay, I would like now to pass the floor to Professor Battiston from ASI, the president.
And Roberto, before you start, you get also 2 questions, which you can then, in your presentation, answer.
Yes.
You can start already the presentation for Roberto, please. Yep. But before you start, I will ask John Howard. Where is he? John, where are you? I don't see you. Okay, over there. And afterwards, Wolfgang Lück, elsewhere over there, to raise your questions, because I thought that both of them are the right questions for Roberto. You want to read already?
Do you want me to go first? Roberto. Ciao.
You asked a question. I already have the answer.
So my question is this. The title is The Role of space agencies in support of emerging countries. I'm interested in also what do you feel is the responsibility of space agencies in emerging countries? And in executing that responsibility, how do we avoid from the more historical and larger space agencies any kind of sort of scientific or technological imperialism or sort of patronization that often occurs when big, rich, or larger, more wealthy organizations tend to try to help smaller, less wealthy organizations? Thank you.
Okay. That one?
The second
Good.
one?
And the second one over here? Do you want to have them?
Oh, no, it's okay.
It's okay.
So I would like to know if there's a role of big space agencies, like for instance ESA, also to partner with commercial companies to help emerging space nations to get the most value out of their own programs, their own Earth observation data, to make it suitable for their own applications, but also to contribute to the international community with this data. This is extremely important for them to be able to fund future missions and to show the benefit of space and Earth observation and satellites to their citizens.
Perfect.
Is there a role?
Yep. So I think what I'm going to say will answer those questions and address also some of the previous questions. But to make it very short, to answer John's question is how to do that is to ask them, and the second part is to let them do. So I will bring 3 examples how this should be done. I mean, should be done as we are doing that, and this will answer, I think, your question. So I will bring it 3 examples. Italy and Kenya, we have a long-term relationship started 50 years ago with the creation of the Malindi base. But in the modern context of interaction with emerging countries, this is evolving towards a new intergovernmental agreement between ASI and the Kenyan leadership, which will have a 5 implementing arrangement focused on the following areas: education and training. This is the most important one because without having the people ready to grasp the opportunity for space in their own country, I mean, everything else has little meaning and will create all kinds of issues which have been addressed so far. And in particular about Earth observation, creating a regional center for Earth observation, telemedicine, and supporting the development of the newly formed Kenyan Space Agency. One specific example which has been done about supporting the Kenyan development in space is supporting the development of the first nanosatellite, which will have a precursor flight next January, February, is a joint effort between JAXA, which is selecting the project, and the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs, which is sponsoring this organization, this initiative, within the United States-Japan program, Kibo Cube. And so Italy is supporting the Kenyan university to develop the satellite, which has been selected by JAXA, and by the way, put in orbit through the JAXA facilities on the International Space Station within the framework of the United Nations Office of Outer Affairs. So this is an example of a multilateral contribution which is focusing on the capability of creating a new small satellite by Kenya. But starting from this experience and trying to make it systematically effective at the African scale, because as Jan Werner correctly pointed out, Africa is one of the emerging ensemble of countries which mostly will tackle and deal with space benefits in the coming years. We have created an international forum which will take place in Nairobi, the 28th of November this year, which is a continuation of an initiative started in Trento last year at the ministerial level at the international fora, where the Minister of Education, together with the Space Agency head of delegation or representative, and representative of the universities or higher education schools, gather together exactly to enhance and stimulate the education in space in the countries of origin. This is specifically going to happen on the African scale, and to promote capacity building in space disciplines as a key to develop high-level technical and scientific knowledge in Africa, promote investment in indigenous human capacity and priority objectives, and to stimulate space cooperation among African countries as a driver for capacity building in Africa, and to let the country in Africa, there are 54 states in Africa, countries in Africa, taking a decisive role in this process. These fora will be open to all African countries at the level of Minister of Education and Research University. We'll exploit the unique IAF network. This conference shows very well with the power of IAF is to enlarge the number of African universities and academia and international space programs, getting them involved in this kind of conference and initiative, and insert the Space for Africa item in the governmental agenda, both in Africa and the rest of the world, to contribute to the sustainable development in Africa. And this clearly is matching many of the development goals of the Uni Plus 50 initiative of UN. Another example, which is very different because it is related with a relation between one single country, Argentina in this case, with changing continent, and Asia, where 20 years of cooperation between Italy and Argentina in space is a different context, but still an emerging country which is making an important step in developing a very ambitious program in space. As in CONA, collaboration with the CIARGE system. The CIARGE is 2 satellites on the L-band, which will be very useful to agriculture and emergency management at the scale, world scale, but in particular in South America, which will be joined to the Cosmos SkyMed X-band and the SAOCOM L-band to make a 4+2 radar satellite ensemble. And this collaboration go through, again, the education part. The Gulli Institute jointly promote Earth observation, advanced studies and application, and scholarship from Argentina coming to Italy and Italian coming to Argentina to get training are being organized since. So this is another example, a different scale of maturity, but again, letting the country decide what to do and helping development of the program, matching activity to make it also useful to Italian programs. And the third element, which is its own characteristics, about the Mexican Space Agency. We started that recently, hosting some of the Mexican students in ASI Geodesy Space Center Matera for training, to learn how to use the satellite data, starting some joint space pilot projects on the Earth observation radar technology applied to different areas of common interest, and providing some development in geoinformation hub in Mexico. This kind of initiative are particularly useful when we have, unfortunately, tragedies and emergencies like the recent earthquake. This is, I did not mention that clearly in this talk, but providing data and information to different countries, emerging countries, when they're hit by disaster, is also a very effective way to help them on a specific point, starting the understanding of how space data can be useful and how they should be used at the level of single individual countries. And I think this is trying to explain what we are doing, and I think that is addressing a number of questions which has been raised so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roberto. The question, may I a little bit come back to this question of John Horek? Do you see any danger of imperialism by the space agencies in science and technology and whatever, or do you just see everything is fine in that way? Yeah, please.
I mean, obviously, if I would say everything is fine, you will start laughing, so I will not say that. I mean, there is obviously an imbalance of knowledge, of economic power, of networking capability between the developing country and the emerging one. So I think, as usual, the devil is on the details. It's how to do things. I mean, the more you can transfer the responsibility of taking decision to the leading key people in the emerging country, the more you will avoid that. is a bilateral or multilateral effort, and the outcome of it will depend, obviously, on the capability of the country to react, the emerging country to react. But if there is a bottom line of that, those countries need more education, more people able to tackle those questions, those issues. Not necessarily the political level are able to do the right choice, because you can imagine why. So I think education, fellowship, training, traveling around and going back to the country are the seeds to make this process more balanced. Without those younger generation call for action and getting them capable to do so, I think this problem will arise systematically. The more this will balance, the better the situation will be.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Looks like education is a very important element. Now we will pass to JAXA and Dr. Kibe to give his presentation and to answer to the questions, and let's see what his views are. Thank you.
As you like it. Okay, then here's the clicker, and I would like to ask, yeah, this, exactly, green is forward, red is stop, or backwards. So Tom Reddell, where is he? Okay, I think your question can be used in this case. So please, and if afterwards you listen to the question and you think, okay, I can contribute to this or that question as well, of course, you are open. Otherwise, I will repeat it. So please.
Hello. My question is just regarding whether some economically impoverished nations or nations with a lower human development index can justify having their own space agency, and if so, what benefits does it bring to the more economically impoverished citizens in that nation?
So the question is, if a company is not very rich, does it still should go also for a space agency, or are there other more important things? This is more or less in simple words what you're asking, right? If you go ahead, and if not, we will ask later on. No problem. No, don't worry, Kibe-san. Please.
Okay. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay. Yes, and in order to encourage the discussion today, and I would like to introduce 3 successful stories of Japan for support. This one? Oh.
Yeah, it will work.
It's okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Support of emergency countries. Oops.
Yeah, it's working. Okay.
These 3. And the first one is related to the Asian Pacific Regional Space Agency Forum. And the second one is the UN JAXA Kibo-Q project. And maybe, and thank you very much for mentioning this. And Dr. Batchstone also mentioned.
You have to speak to the mic, otherwise
okay.
I can't hear you. And
the third one is a UN Japan long-term fellowship program. I will start the first one, Asian Pacific Regional Space Agency Forum. And you know that this framework was established in 1993. It's a long, long time ago. And this is a unique forum, as indicated here. I'm sorry. Unique and largest forum in the Asia-Pacific region to enhance space activities for socio-economic development in the region. The most unique feature is it is operated on a voluntary base. And this is a group photo of APR CEF 23rd in 2016 in Manila, Philippines, and around 600 participants from over the 30 countries and 10 international organizations gathered and discussed. This is a structure, and APR CEF has 4 working groups. The one is, first one is a space application working group, and the space technology working group, and the space environment utilization working group, and the last one, but not least, and you know that the space education working group. And they are not only discussing, but also conducting several joint projects like Sentinel Asia, and which is information networking for disaster management, or the SAFE project. It's a platform for long-term environment change observation and data archive. Okay, And next, and I would like to introduce an Kibo and the Q project. And because an organizer gave me only 4 minutes, then I have to in a hurry. Okay, and the Kibo Q project. This is also yes, and you know that we have a very unique facility, and which is exposed pallet on the space station. And recently, we installed the JSSOD, small satellite orbital deployer, and which can deploy small satellite from the space station up to 50 kilograms. So, under the framework between the UN-USA and Japan, and the JAXA is to offer 1 launch opportunity per year to the organizations in the developing country. And the first one is Guatemala satellite, and it's to launch in this year. And the second one is a Kenyan sat, which has already been selected and to be launched in 2018. Last one, and the UN-Japan Long-Term Fellowship Program. And actually, this is not the activity of JAXA, but it's a very example and what even a lot of small university can do for emerging countries. Yes, this is a history of that. And you know that under the framework of UN BSTI, BSTI means Basic Space Technology Initiative, and QTech, Kyushu Institute of Technology, it's a rather small university in Japan, started its DNST program. And later, I'm running time?
Wow, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, and which was expanded to PNST program. And in order to provide hands-on experience necessary to build capability in a basic space technology, especially infrastructure building through research and test of nano satellite. Yes, and they also started this course for foreign students. And so far, and from 2013 through 2017, and 71 students from all over the world is indicated here, and have been studied and in this system. And that's all so far.
Okay, thank you very much. I hand over back to Christina, and we are a little bit, of course, our time constraints are always there. Thank you, thank you. But I would like the question of Craig Camacho, where are you? Craig, are you here?
Yeah.
Okay, quick your question, because maybe we get a Mexican answer to that.
Hi everyone, my name is Greg Camacho. I'm from the International Space University. And in the Philippines, we actually recently launched our first microsatellite with the help of JAXA. And we're close to establishing our space agency. And my question is, we've had a lot of support from the region, like JAXA, for example. And is there a way for other non-regional established players to support countries like the Philippines who are on the other side of the world? Thank you.
You got the question? No, it's you, Xavier. And you have a presentation?
Yes, but
do it.
Slides. Yes.
Yeah, do it.
Okay, I will cover your concern, giving attracting towards the Mexican case. No, I don't have any.
You don't have
slides.
Okay, excuse me, I made a mistake. Yes.
It's slideless presentation.
Okay, seamless, slideless.
Okay. Yeah. The question is the role of space agencies.
We're running out of time.
Why is worth a space agency in a developing country? Why the governments must invest money, because at the end of the day it's taxpayer money, to promote, to foster the economy at the end of the day, via human capital, infrastructure, a means for societal need, attention, or tackling even not only local but global, including environmental, climate change, and so on. Of course, the developing countries confront a dilemma: either replicate the linear model step by step, similar to developing countries, or just, I would say, surfing the waves that are coming. The Space 4.0, Internet of Things, broadband in space, high resolution, near real-time systems that are, and that's not only in the space field, it's in other high technology fields, pharmaceutical, nanomaterials, new energy sources, and so on. The idea is how to position between the tackling of societal needs and the infrastructure development for fostering the economy. The case of Mexico is an example. Mexico has a very good aerospace field, but this aerospace is mostly aeronautics. I would say 97% planes and only 3% space. But we have another asset, which is information technology. These two pillars could foster the space investment. Many international companies invest in the aerospace business in Mexico, but mostly planes or aeronautical. The transition from planes to satellites, from turbines to rockets is quite easy, and that in the same way as we transit from car manufacturing to aerospace. Yep. And that's a cooperation. The risk is to stay only in the manufacturing aspects, in the service aspects, in the low wage. And that's the role of the space agencies, how to promote the investment in the country, at the same time as developing local capacities to go beyond the technician work towards more research, development, engineering, and design. That's a very important decision that the countries have to make in their space policy, which is also part of the economic development policy and education policy, how to develop the competitivity at the same time as developing capacities, infrastructure, industrial liaisons, and also looking to the future. We have very important examples in the Latin American region. For example, Brazil has managed to put together a very interesting space program, as well as Argentina, but via the international cooperation. For the case of countries as Mexico, in which we have a strong manufacturing sector, we have to select these gap fillers, obviously, that will be in the field of small satellites, Internet of Things, tackling our societal needs, broadband communications for everybody. In Mexico, we have 150,000 communities which the only access is via satellite. No cable, no fiber, no Wi-Fi, no nothing other than satellites. Then role of the space agencies trying to attract more and more investment for research and development, select those gap fillers, involve international cooperation directly through companies or through space agencies, in which we are very grateful for the agreements that we have with some 2,000 space agencies around the world.
Thank you very much. And Christina, because time, I would like you now to go to the other two panelists without any interruption. I still have a lot of questions, but otherwise we are out of time. So.
Yes, indeed. There are a lot of questions, and I would like to pass the floor directly to our Indonesian colleague, Dr. Dimaludin. If I pronounced it correct, I apologize.
You have a presentation?
Yes, yes.
Okay, then please. Would you like to do it from there?
Okay,
okay.
From here. Thank you. I'd like just to example of the space activities in Indonesia as one of the emerging countries. We have 4 core competences. That is, first is the space sciences. So second, developing the aerospace technology, rocket technology, satellite technology, and aeronautic technology. And the third is the remote sensing. This is the data collecting and the application of the remote sensing. And the last is the aerospace studies. In general, the space weather is very important in this space science. And we know that the modern technology that based on the space need information concerning the space weather. And Indonesia is one of the member of the space weather community, and we provide the information concerning the space weather in our website. There's also the studies concerning the space debris. So far, many space debris fell in Indonesia area, and last year there is the rocket part of the rocket bodies from the SpaceX fell in Indonesia area, and also several months ago there is the Chinese rocket also fell in Indonesia area. And we use also the space data for making the meteorological warning, and we make what is called the space-based disaster early warning system based on the satellite. And we try to develop our capacity in developing the rocket technology for sounding rocket technology, and also we have the satellite program. So far, we have launched 3 micro satellites. 8E1, A2, and A3, and now we are preparing the 8E4. In the future, maybe next 5 years, we hope to make the constellation of the microsatellite. And this is the example of the 8E3, and use also this for the agriculture application. And we also use the ICE sensor, automatic identification system, for monitoring the ship tracking. And this is very important for Indonesia for detecting the illegal fishing. And we also developing the aircraft technology. This in collaboration with the aircraft industry. Last month we have the first flight of this 19 passenger aircraft. We also developing the UAV. This for maritime very important. And for remote sensing, we use the ground station in central part of Indonesia. We collect the low resolution to up to high resolution data, and we use this data for many applications, for forest monitoring, and also for the regional developing planning, and also relating to the climate change. We also use the remote sensing data to detect the forest degradation. And this is some example of the application of the remote sensing for water surface area monitoring. This for lake and so on, for mining monitoring, and also very important for hotspot monitoring concerning the forest fire. And also we use this for the fishing ground potential identification. We used from the satellite data, we give information to the fishermen where the area that many fish there. This is the example of the use of the remote sensing data and capacity building in Indonesia. We hope the collaboration with the developed countries in space is very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go directly to the next presentation from our South African colleague. You have the floor.
Yeah, but before you start, in that case, I have a question. You have to put that question to your answers. Minu, where are you? Minu? Okay, your question, please. And you should take it especially for Africa, whatever she's saying, especially for Africa. We will see what she's saying.
So based on the model of ESA that consists of 22 member states, I was wondering whether you could identify one pro and one con of having a potential regional space agency in Africa.
Okay. Okay, but go through your presentation and maybe you can answer that question in between.
By the way, there's a paper in the press in the Journal of Space Policy that addresses the question, which I kind of wrote, but I'll address it. So I thought I'd take a slightly different approach to this presentation. And first of all, just to put the policy context on the table and then to give you a little bit of the specifics. I think it's important to differentiate between what's a developed nation, a developing nation, and an emerging space nation. So in terms of the developing nations, are those countries that have been there, done that, and they're kind of way up front. And I think the bigger focus these days is on space exploration, planetary missions. With developing nations, the focus is more on how do we take space, science and technology, and use the benefits in terms of addressing the socioeconomic challenges on the country or in the region. And South Africa is essentially one of those examples. And the emerging space nations are those who have aspirations but haven't quite broken out of the mold as yet. And so there's an intention, but not quite. So what's impeding emerging nations? And there's a number of factors that one needs sourcing. You need to have the financial commitments. But I also should point out that if you look at investments in space science and technology, in the broader policy context, it sits in this broader science and technology landscape. So if you have a weak science and technology base, you're going to have a weak space science and technology base as well. And then the fourth one is around human capital. You need the warm bodies to work in a space program. And if you have the weakness in that area, you need to invest as well. And then the fifth one is if you have addressed all of those other factors, you need the infrastructure on the ground in order to utilize that infrastructure to address the socioeconomic problems in the country. So how can developed and developing nations assist emerging nations? So I think from a political support point of view, highlighting the benefits or the socioeconomic benefits is one area. Because you've been there and done that, you can actually quantify some of these benefits. But it's difficult because space is, as we know, is a global business. But there's also a public good value associated with that, and that's very difficult to measure. When you're talking about limited financial resourcing, prioritization is very important. Obviously, if you're an emerging space nation, you don't talk about planetary missions. You don't talk about going to the moon. You've got to look at how do you use space science and technology to address socioeconomic problems. And then developed nations and developing nations can also assist on technology readiness level by technology transfer. On the human capital side, knowledge transfer. And then if you look at making some progress in terms of infrastructure, you look at co-development. But why hasn't this happened to date? And I think there's three very key issues. Intellectual property rights. If you have a competitive advantage, you don't want to give that away. So that becomes a sticky issue. The second one is on the implementation cost. So who foots the bill in order for the orange to map onto the green part of this equation? And then the third one is also the culture and the geopolitics. And sometimes there's not a willingness to work across some of these boundaries. So where does that put South Africa in this map? As a developing nation, we have aspirations, and we look at developed nations. And just by the way, an hour and a half ago, we signed an agreement with DLR, which you started. So we reconfirmed our commitment to that. And there's many examples of those. But just in terms of emerging nations, and I'm talking specifically with regards to Africa, we have a foreign policy in South Africa that says that we have a responsibility to ensure the development of Africa. So I'll just turn to the second slide. So this is Africa. It has 55 countries. There has been some progress. There's a lot that is happening in Africa at the moment. We've have an African space policy and an African space strategy, which was developed since 2013. It was approved last year in January by the African Union Summit. And the African Union Summit passed a recommendation that the African Union Commission needs to develop the governance structure and the implementation plan. So just in terms of the governance structure, there's two drivers at the moment. The one is the move towards an African space agency, and the second is a committee of African space institutions. And one can argue about the pros and cons on whether you need an African space agency right now or not, because some of us, like myself, believe that it's not quite the right time. Because if you want to set up an African space agency, the precondition is that you need very strong national space agencies or space programs as well. Otherwise, you have a weak foundational base, and you're trying to come up from the top. And it might be a fruitless expenditure to some exercise to some extent. So there are some initiatives that we are working together as African countries and looking at collective momentum. So the one is in the African Resource Management Constellation, where it's Kenya, Algeria, Nigeria, and South Africa have clubbed together. So as an example, we're currently building a 450 kilogram satellite, 2.5 meter resolution, where we will make that data available for all African countries. We're also working on what is called an African Data Intensive Research Cloud. And this is to provide a cloud-based services for all African countries. So when we make the satellite data available, the data can be pulled through such a cloud. And we're also looking at an African instrumentation network. There's a weakness in Africa in terms of in situ data. We have geospatial data, but not in situ data. So that's on the move. And there's also AfriGeos. So South Africa is one of 4 co-chairs for the Group on Earth Observation, together with China, European Commission, and US. And so we introduced this concept of AfriGeos, where we're pushing it in Africa. And then the Square Kilometre Array, if you go to the South African stand, this is the biggest radio astronomy project in the world that is co-hosted between South Africa with 8 African partner countries and Australia. And the last one is South Africa has also been earmarked to host the Pan-African Space Science Institute, where African students will come to South Africa and undertake master's and PhD studies. And so what's pulling all of this together is that space agencies need to start working together on collaborative programs like I've just mentioned. And this is an example of developing nations working with emerging space nations. So just to come back in closing chair on Minu's question, I think we need to be careful about, I know ESA model is a model that we are also looking at in terms of the African Space Agency. And in terms of Europe, you kind of split between ESA and the European Commission. We know that there's a history behind that. And we don't want the same in Africa. You cannot have an African Space Agency and an African Union Commission driving it, against each other. And so what we want to do is to create the base that's coming from the bottom, and you need very strong national space agencies like you have in Europe. We don't necessarily have that in Africa. So ultimately, we should be working towards ESA, but it's a process. It's not an event where you suddenly turn the lights on and there's an African Space Agency. You've got to work towards that. And I just want to caution that it is a process and it's a journey that you have to walk. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I would like to give the floor to our colleague Alvarado from Costa Rica to do the closing part and give us his view on this.
Short.
He will be very short, I'm sure.
Do we have the presentation? Thank you. Oh, can I pass the slides? Is this?
Yeah.
Well, I was asked to do the keynote speaker of this panel, but of course for time constraints, we need to be very brief. So I will try to jump to successful cases that we were talking about, cooperation, very concrete examples. We already mentioned the case of Mexico. I think it is important to highlight the current times. The tragedy that happened in Mexico a few days ago, it's a good opportunity for us to understand how important it is for emerging nations creating these capabilities to manage this kind of events. So just want to highlight this and to say, and to send this message to Mexico in these times that they have been also creating capabilities. This, for example, is a workshop that they organized with United Nations in July 2017. And, well, some very specific cooperation cases between Costa Rica and Korea, trainings that we did in 2011 within Japan. For example, Japan is right now one of our partners for the first Central American satellite that is going to be launched next year to the International Space Station, thanks to the collaboration of Kyushu Institute of Technology. This is the technical team, by the way, that is right now working in the satellite project. Within Germany also, we did a very good, close collaboration in the previous years, and now we have an agreement signed already with DLR, between the Costa Rican government and DLR in low Earth orbit technologies and the cooperation for these kind of technologies in the country within the scientific community. Also, the cooperation, also the organizations like Secure World Foundation that have been from the public and civil society. There was a question about, regarding the role and engagement between the civil society and the NGOs, for example. This is one good example. Secure World Foundation as an NGO in the US, working within Costa Rica, creating capacities, and of course, the products that they have been producing to helping us to get involved in this new paradigm of technology. Of course, United Nations, last year we organized the United Nations Workshop on Human Space Technology. Thanks to the United Nations and the president of my country, that we gather in the country space astronauts, cosmonauts, and also taikonauts that came and visit. But we tried to, and this is very important, I think this is one of the most important messages. This is not a rock concert. This is the National Stadium of Costa Rica. The last year when we organized this event, 10,000 young people, students, high school students, sent to the Ministry of Education of Costa Rica. So I'm sure that we will continue working in education, we will be able to continue impacting the emerging world in this way, because the ambition and the enthusiasm and the inspiration that we are getting is very, very powerful for the future. Okay, and why? And this is the main question, and I will just finish with this. Why emerging nations should invest in space? Well, first, the global value chain, the space economy around the world, it's estimated to be at least more than $300 billion. So of then 77% of the space economy comes from the satellite industry. So what are countries doing? For example, in our case, we created an aerospace cluster. Since 7 years ago, we started with this idea, and in 2014, we made it possible thanks to the Costa Rican Foreign Investment Agency. And now this cluster is totally prepared to continue selling services to the world. And this is a spillover effect of working, creating capabilities also with the private sector. In the case of the promotion and development of national capacities to monitor and respond to climate change and, of course, natural disasters, this is, for us, a very important aspect. This is what we call the Costa Rican striptease. Costa Rica, by 1987, we practically did erase all the forest coverage of the country. So now, thanks to our law and the environmental protection efforts, we have been recovered the forest coverage by 54% of our national territory. But we need to continue creating these opportunities to apply the technology in our native necessities. And of course, there are many, many applications that we can talk about. Finally, education, again, development of critical mass in STEM capacity, science, technology, and engineering, involvement of women in science and technology, involvement of women in space. Last year, we organized a workshop with women, the participation of Costa Rican models of inspiration, women to young students, also to inspire them and to encourage them to study technical careers. And also, for example, universities like the University of Costa Rica right now is working in creating capacities with students. Also, the Costa Rica Institute of Technology, for example, this is another spillover effect of the first Central American satellite. Now, we opened the first small satellite lab in the Costa Rica Institute of Technology, and Dr. Adolfo Chavez, who is here in the public, is right now leading this effort in the Costa Rica Institute of Technology. So the seed that we planted, and I want to go to your presentation because you show how a tree was growing. That's it, the seed, and this is the kind of product that we want to develop. And of course, new commercial opportunities. When we talk about space mining, why Costa Rica is not involved? Why the other emerging countries are not involved right now in the discussions? For example, in the United Nations discussion concerning the regulation of these activities, we want to be part of this industry. And of course, the last frontier. We want also to be part of the future cosmic society. It is very well known that human beings are going to migrate to space in the next decades, and we will have the technology. We want to be part of this also human being endeavor. And that's why we in Latin America, for example, I would like just to end with this, the group of Latin American and the Caribbean that right now is the chairmanship. Yesterday, we passed the chairmanship to Mr. Ronnie Nader, the president of the Ecuadorian Space Agency, that have been doing a terrific job also in Ecuador, in the Central American region. I've been developing this opportunity to also get engaged with private companies to get Latin Americans to space and creating a program that will enable us to also dream to be in the space. And well, that was my naive question. In my presentation, I wanted just to end with this. Why developed space agencies should cooperate with emerging nations? And I think Mr. Roberto Batizon, he was very clear when he commented about what's the responsibility of developed space agencies about this. So this is another way to reframe these questions. What are the next steps? Well, that's why we are here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this end. Today's GNF was on the role of the space agencies in support of emerging countries. I think what we can take is that one of the roles is to inspire and motivate the next generation. Thank you all very much, and see you next time.